What if I told you that the Harry Potter books contain scenes so dark, so genuinely disturbing, that the filmmakers simply decided audiences were not ready to see them? We all grew up watching those movies, thinking we knew the full story. But the truth is, J.K. Rowling wrote a world far more brutal than anything that ever made it onto the big screen. Today we are pulling back the curtain on 6 of the most chilling, gut-wrenching moments from the books that Hollywood quietly left on the cutting room floor. Stick around because by the end of this video, you are going to see the wizarding world in a completely different light. Let's kick things off with one of the most shocking endings in the entire series. At the conclusion of Goblet of Fire, we learn that the person who spent an entire school year teaching defense against the dark arts was not actually Alistair Moody at all. It was Barty Crouch Jr., who had been using Polyjuice Potion to maintain his disguise throughout the whole year. His master plan had been to manipulate events so that Harry would reach the graveyard at the perfect moment for Voldemort's resurrection. Once his cover was blown, Dumbledore and the others managed to extract a confession from him. But here is where the film completely diverges from the book. In the movie, Crouch Jr. just sort of disappears from the story. In the book, Minister Cornelius Fudge arrived at Hogwarts, refused to believe a single word of the confession, and immediately ordered a Dementor to perform the Dementor's kiss on Crouch Jr., essentially ripping out his soul on the spot. His fate ended up eerily mirroring that of the very people his master had tortured into madness, which brings us perfectly to our next scene. Neville Longbottom is one of the most beloved characters in the entire series, but the books take his backstory to places the films barely scratched the surface of. During Order of the Phoenix, Harry and his friends visit St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries to check on Arthur Weasley. While there, they stumble upon Neville visiting his parents, Frank and Alice, who have been permanent patients for years. The films mention the torture briefly, but what the books show is genuinely heartbreaking. Frank and Alice were subjected to the Cruciatus curse for so long that their minds completely shattered. They no longer recognize each other. They no longer recognize their own son. Their mental state regressed entirely, leaving them unable to comprehend the world around them. Yet in one quiet, devastating moment, Alice shuffles over to Neville and presses a gum wrapper into his hand. His grandmother tells him to throw it away. Neville keeps it because it came from his mother, and somewhere deep down he hopes it means she remembered something. Rowling herself later confirmed that the Longbottoms would never recover. That single gum wrapper might be the saddest object in the entire series. Now here is one that completely reframes a major plot point in the films. Remember when the Death Eaters used a vanishing cabinet to sneak into Hogwarts in Half-Blood Prince? That scheme traced back to a moment far earlier in the story, involving a student named Graham Montague. A Slytherin member of Umbridge's inquisitorial squad, Montague docked points from Fred and George Weasley, and the twins responded by shoving him into a broken vanishing cabinet. Because the cabinet was damaged, Montague became trapped in a kind of magical limbo between Hogwarts and Borgin and Berks. When he eventually managed to apparate out, he emerged inside a toilet and spent weeks recovering in the hospital wing. The terrifying part is that Montague later told other Slytherins what happened to him. Nobody believed him except Draco Malfoy, who then figured out how the vanishing cabinets worked, repaired one, and used it to bring Death Eaters directly into Hogwarts. The Weasley twins, in their careless act of revenge, inadvertently set off a chain of events that led to one of the darkest nights in Hogwarts history. Moving deeper into the shadows, let us talk about Barty Crouch Sr. and the devastating sacrifice his wife made. When Crouch Sr. had his own son sent to Azkaban, his wife was utterly broken by grief. She begged her husband to intervene, and eventually she convinced him to do something unthinkable. During a prison visit, she drank Polyjuice Potion, took on her son's appearance and stayed behind in his cell, while Barty Crouch Jr. walked free disguised as her. She died in Azkaban, alone, imprisoned, under her son's name and was buried in secret. She gave up everything, including her identity and her life, just to free her child. It is one of the most quietly devastating acts in the entire series, and the films never touched it. Here is something that will genuinely unsettle you. Boggarts reveal a person's deepest fear. The films showed us some memorable ones, but they skipped over what is arguably the most emotionally devastating Boggart encounter in the books. When Molly Weasley encounters one in Order of the Phoenix, it does not take the form of a single frightening creature. Instead, it shows her the bodies of her family members, one by one. Ron, Ginny, Arthur, Fred, George, and even Harry, all dead before her eyes. She tries to cast ridiculous, but cannot focus through her tears, and every time she attempts the spell, another body appears. Molly Weasley, the warm heart of the entire series, stands alone facing her worst nightmare, completely unable to fight it off. It is a devastating reminder that behind all her warmth and strength was a mother utterly terrified of losing the people she loved. Finally, the Quidditch World Cup attack was shown in Goblet of Fire, but the film version barely captured how genuinely horrifying it was in the books. The Death Eaters did not just march through the campsite causing general chaos. They specifically targeted a Muggle family called the Roberts, who had kindly allowed their land to be used for the event. They levitated the entire family high into the air, twisting and contorting their bodies while a crowd gathered below. When the ministry finally arrived and dispersed the attackers, they wiped the Roberts family's memories entirely. These were innocent people who had shown nothing but generosity, and they were made to suffer and then forget they had ever suffered at all. The Harry Potter books always contained a much darker heart than the films dared to show. These stories were never just about magic and adventure. They were about grief, sacrifice, trauma, and the very real cost of living through war. If you have only ever seen the movies, you have genuinely missed the full story. Let us know in the comments which of these scenes shocked you the most, and make sure you subscribe because we have plenty more deep dives into the wizarding world coming your way.